What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Dolphins In Depth podcast. I'm Daniel Oyefusi. Thanks so much for tuning in. And after 17 weeks in the regular season, an action-packed postseason, we have reached the conclusion of the 2021 NFL season. All of that culminating in Super Bowl 56 last Sunday, with the Rams coming away with the 23-20 win over the Cincinnati Bengals in their home stadium, SoFi Stadium in Inglewood. I hope you guys enjoy the game. I did. I was out there in the press box to report on it, watch the game. It was great down to the final play when Aaron Donald made that big play to cause the incompletion by Joe Burrow. So now we kind of transition into the offseason. I know as Dolphins fans, I know you guys have probably already had your eyes set on the offseason for some time, but now we can really transition into that. So this episode will be kind of encapsulating the Super Bowl. Looking back to last week, it's been a couple of days, but the Dolphins introduced new coach Mike McDaniel last Thursday, so we'll talk about that. But first, I'm going to bring in David Wilson. You know him, sports writer for the Miami Herald. David, how you doing, man?
Good. I thought we were talking about the Kristaps Porzingis trade, though.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that was the real bomb that
Yeah.
this past week. Yeah, of course, Wizards fans, Wizards joke there. But great to have you, man. Let's start right with Super Bowl. I know you tweeted it out during the game. I don't remember exactly when it was, but you said, Aaron Donald is the best player in the NFL, no doubt. And a lot of people think he was snubbed for MVP. Obviously, he had 2 sacks, a couple quarterback hits. He really had the two final plays. I mean, his hands are all over it. You have him literally grabbing Samaje Perine with one hand to prevent him from getting a first down, and then you have him ragdolling the offensive lineman, getting his hands on Joe Burrow and forcing that incompletion that sealed the game on 4th down. But MVP honors ultimately went to wide receiver Cooper Kupp, who had 8 catches, 92 yards, and 2 touchdowns, including the game winner with 125 left. I just got a plain ask you, was Aaron Donald snubbed?
I mean, I would have voted for him, right? If I had a vote, I think he was the best player. I think, obviously voting for those awards, I don't know exactly when they happen, but a lot of times people have kind of got, you're in a rush after the game. So Kupp made the play a couple of minutes earlier. I wonder if that Donald play had happened with 2 minutes left to basically win the game instead of, what was it, 30 seconds or whatever it was, 15 seconds. If it would have maybe been different, but just based on the Super Bowl history and the way MVP votes always go, it was kind of no doubt it was going to be Kupp. I thought, although Stafford was also obviously has the 2 picks, but the one was not his fault. I wonder if that pick, the second pick, doesn't happen, if he maybe wins the MVP, because the throw he made to Kupp on the slant that everyone was saying was the no look pass was probably the biggest offensive play of the game, and that was more Stafford than Kupp. Obviously, they're both part of it. I don't know. I mean, to me, I don't think you could go wrong either way. I would have gone with Donald because, again, I think just he is the best player in the league, and he looked like it for really the second half of that game, and made, again, like you said, probably the 2 biggest plays at the end, with all due respect to Kupp and Stafford. But again, you wrote about Kupp after the game. It's one of the best wide receiver seasons ever. Probably, certainly the best one since at least the Calvin Johnson year where he set the receiving yards record. Yeah. And he's the MVP of that offense with all due respect to Stafford. He was the engine for them. It's kind of funny. His numbers were good. Obviously, he caught 2 touchdowns with less than 100 yards. It's not kind of a typical stat line for a receiver who wins MVP. I guess Edelman was the last one. I don't remember exactly what his numbers were.
If I remember, he had bigger numbers.
I think he had bigger numbers. That was a weird defensive struggle Super Bowl too. But to me, you couldn't have gone wrong either way. I would have gone Donald, but I don't know if I would say it's a snub because I think Kupp was pretty well deserving too.
Yeah, one thing that you pointed out early on that I really want to mention, because a lot of people didn't know this or don't know this, is that the voting starts, I guess it's collected with like 2 minutes left in the
Yeah,
game.
I saw a tweet about that, but I wasn't sure exactly what the.
Yeah, so I'm assuming around that time it would have been like right after the touchdown catch or right before that. And at that point, I mean, Cooper Kupp was pretty quiet during that game. I know he had a touchdown early on,
Yeah.
but he was fairly quiet. I mean, he had
Yeah, there
four
was
of
like
his.
no obvious pick for most of that game,
Yeah, exactly.
unless the Bengals won, then it was going to be T. Higgins.
Yeah, exactly. So, with Cup, he had 4 of his 8 catches on that final drive, and then he had like a big jet sweep on 4th down that continued that drive.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, if you kind of watch that game up until if you kind of turn the game off right when he caught touchdown pass, you're like, oh yeah, of course it's gonna be him. But then you see Aaron Donald do what he does, and I agree with you. I think that if the vote was collected like as soon as the game ended, I'm pretty sure
Yeah, or even if
Donald
you give
gets
him
it.
5 minutes after the game or something like that to like actually
Yeah.
think about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Downey gets it. But again, no complaints from the Rams. They're world champions. They're enjoying it all. They're going to Disneyland or whatever they go after they win the Super Bowl. So congrats to them. And as we kind of look big picture, I know me and Andre spoke about this a couple weeks back, I believe after the championship game of the divisional round, just kind of like big picture takeaways, like what you take away from that game. For me, it's like it reinforced trench play. We all knew how bad the Bengals offensive line was, and they actually held up pretty well for the first like 2.5 quarters. But then once the Rams defensive front got it going, and it wasn't even just Donald. It was like Von Miller, Leonard Floyd, Ernest Jones. Like those guys got it going, and they just had no answer. I think Burrow was sacked 7 times, which tied a Super Bowl record. It just for me it reinforced like, yeah, I mean you have to have great quarterback play, and I thought that both quarterbacks were good. I wouldn't go to say that any of them were great on Sunday. But it really that game. I mean, I said I thought the game was going to be won by the Rams because of the line play, especially the defensive line of the Rams versus Cincinnati's offensive line. And really, truthfully, it came down to that. Up until the final moments that we saw with Donald.
Yeah, they literally the last plays of the game. What was it? It's 3rd and 2 or 3rd and 1, and they can't pick it up, and it's because their offensive line was overwhelmed by the Bengals offensive line. Yeah, I mean those are the less. I was gonna ask like if you're what the NFL is a copycat league, like every sport league, like what. The Rams, I think it's kind of hard to take like rebuilding lessons from them because they just kind of, I can't imagine a lot of people are going to do the level of like trade all your draft picks away to like just load up on short-term talent as they did. Yeah. But the lessons are, I think, like you said, it's all about line play unless you have like a superhuman quarterback who can make up for it, which Joe Burrow was like in that kind of zone for a lot of the playoffs, even if the numbers weren't crazy, like, some of the guys he was going up against, just his escapability and like his ability to extend plays is, if he is playing with a clean pocket, you don't get to probably appreciate that aspect of his game as much, but obviously his numbers would probably be better. You can make do without offensive line play, but it's going to catch up to you eventually in that.
Yeah, and it did.
For the Bengals, and it's hard to build that up, right? Like the Bengals, obviously the AFC seems like it's going to be stacked, and the Bengals have a pretty stiff comp. Like they're not going to be like a no-brainer to be back there a million more times. Yeah, because it's hard to build an offensive line.
No, it is. I mean, they have the money there. I know a lot of people were criticizing the Jamar Chase pick over Penny Sewell at number 4. And early on it was like, you probably should have got that offensive lineman, but then you see Chase do what he does, win NFL offensive rookie of the year, and you're like, all right, well maybe they got that pick, but now you really got to invest some money and some draft picks into the offensive line. So we'll see what happens there. I guess the last thing for Super Bowl that I want to ask you, and we gotta talk about this, is the halftime show. We talked about it a little bit earlier. You had Snoop Dogg, Dr. Dre, Kendrick Lamar, Mary J. Blige, Eminem. We had some guest appearances by 50 Cent, Anderson .Paak on the drums. I had to include this into my notebook that I wrote game day. So I headed out of the press box. I wanted to get a good view. This nice lady let me stand next to her so I could get a good spot for my camera while I recorded. I was feeling it. I'm a big Kendrick Lamar fan. That's like my top 2-3 favorite rappers ever. So I loved it. I love All Right. I like that. I wasn't old enough to grow up in the Snoop Dr. Dre era.
Yeah, that's my demographic a little bit.
but I still did appreciate
Dr. Dre is a little before my time. Like NWA Dr. Dre at least.
You're right. Yeah, I did appreciate the homage to Mary J. Blige because she's the queen of hip hop. So I did appreciate that. And Eminem, I'm not an Eminem guy, but hey, he has the ties to Dr. Dre. The crowd. I think the crowd.
Yeah, really Lose Yourself. Like how I was shocked they didn't start with Lose Yourself. Honestly, I thought for sure that was how they were going to start the.
It was kind of they didn't finish the show with Lose Yourself. It was like the second to last song, I believe.
Yeah.
But they more or less like the crowd went crazy. Like the woman that I was next to when Kendrick Lamar was doing all right, she was just kind of like, yeah, whatever. Yeah. When Lose Yourself came on, she was on spaghetti, mom. Like she was into it. I know a lot of people from the jump, they were saying that this was like the greatest halftime show ever. I don't like the big picture hot takes as soon as like stuff is over. Kind of like with the Stafford Hall of Fame as soon as
won.
I don't like all that. I like to kind of like sit back, enjoy it, and then maybe reflect on it. But I mean, it's up there for me, and for the people listening. I'm 24. You're a little bit older than me. So I don't have I wasn't old enough to really remember Prince or Michael Jackson.
Well, we don't remember the Michael Jackson one, which is considered the first great one, I think, right? What year was that? The Prince one is the unassailable number one.
I was an adolescent.
I was a kid I was in middle school or high school during that. Yeah. So I kind of remember it. And I actually wrote when the Super Bowl was in Miami a couple years ago for a section. I did an oral history of it and talked.
Oh, really?
Okay. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
So I'm biased because I did that, and I'm a Prince fan and all that kind of stuff. But
gotcha.
Playing Purple Rain in the rain, and all those guys thought they were gonna get electrocuted because they actually had their instruments playing. A lot of the halftime shows, they kind of fake a lot of it.
Yeah.
Because it's such a production. Yeah, that's the unassailable number one. I can't imagine there's ever going to be anything that tops it. But yeah, this one is up there, right? They played hits that I think have pretty close to universal approval rating, but are not overplayed necessarily. It's a little different, there was that run in the early 2000s when it was all classic rock acts, and they're all playing hits and stuff, but a lot of them are kind of overplayed, and they're way past their prime. A lot of those guys, these guys for the most part, 50 Cent, Dr. Dre, Snoop, Eminem, obviously are all past their prime. They're on the second or third or fourth acts of their career. But you get Kendrick Lamar out there, give it a little bit of a little bit more of a modern bent, and and it fits. And they've done a much better job of this in the last 10 years or whatever of making it fit the
demographic and the times. Because
it fit the city. It fit the city. For a long time, when they were just Paul McCartney, you'll do the Super Bowl in Jacksonville. I think. That just didn't make sense.
Yeah, you had a Compton native and Kendrick. You had some long beats and and whatnot. Even Anderson .Paak is an Oxnard, California native. So I like that. And really kind of going big picture to your point, hip hop is a global job. It wasn't like that originally. It wasn't as mainstream as it is now. So even when you say 50 Cent, there's people from all walks of lives that remember that song.
That was the number one song. The Lose Yourself probably, I think, won an Oscar.
Lose Yourself was probably number ones, but but even some of the songs that Snoop performed and whatnot, everyone remembers that. Everyone knows that. So I really enjoyed it. I'm not gonna say it's the best. I know. So I will say the first Super Bowl halftime show that I remember, and not for good reason, was 2004 with Janet Jackson and
obviously.
So I was kind of scarred as a little kid seeing that, but. From then on, my top three for me personally, just the ones that I enjoyed the most, Beyonce,
that's up there.
That the lights went out. Bruno a couple years later, which I think was Super Bowl 50, I believe. And then this one, top three for me, I'd have to say that. I feel like we had some duds in there. I don't remember.
So a lot of people love the Shakira J-Lo one that was in Miami in 2020.
It was cool.
I was there, and it does not work the same when you're there, and you're not up close, and
Yeah.
sound kind of sucks in the stadium. But people like that one.
The sound was good. Like the sound was great. The acoustics were
Yeah.
great. It sounded great when I was in there. So I think that like gets a big thumbs up from me there. So I enjoyed that. I remember Black Eyed Peas did not get good reviews.
That was not good. I'm actually looking at this Rolling Stone right now. They did a ranking of all of them. They actually put this one, I think, 4th. So
okay.
We're not far off base. They had Black Eyed Peas last.
That was bad. I think like they had mic issues. They were lip singing. It was all bad. Yeah. So yeah, we've come a long way from for the Super Bowl halftime shows. I know Jay-Z has like been having a big role in that. So I mean, he's doing his job right there. So
yeah, I was thinking like, everyone, it was kind of like a running joke on Twitter that people were like, they're finally doing one for the young people, and then like, but it's like, oh, it's not for young people anymore. It's for like people in their 20s and 30s and early 40s, and like the Aerosmith played the Super Bowl in 2001. It's kind of like the same thing, right? Like they were big in the 80s, and they did it 20 years later, and that's where we're at with Dre and Snoop and them.
It's
all those guys were
like,
big in the 90s, early 2000s, and here we are 20 years later. They get to do the Super Bowl.
Yeah, it's crazy how time passes, and just like what's like kind of like the old generation now. It's just crazy how that happens. We're gonna take a short break, but when we come back on the other side of things, we're gonna talk Dolphins. That means the Dolphins In Depth podcast. So we got to talk some Dolphins. It's been almost a week since the Dolphins introduced their new coach, Mike McDaniel. So we're going to talk about that as well as some early impressions as he works to build his first coaching staff. So stay with us. What's going on, everybody? Daniel Oyefusi still here with David Wilson. Talked a lot of Super Bowl halftime show MVP stuff in the first half, but we're gonna get back to the Dolphins. And it's been a busy week. Last Thursday, the Dolphins introduced new coach Mike McDaniel. He addressed reporters for the first time, laid out kind of his vision for this team and kind of how he got here, what he sees for the team. And since then, I mean, he's hit the ground running. A lot of news on the coaching staff front. As it stands right now, the Dolphins have their offensive coordinator set. Frank Smith, who is an assistant with the Los Angeles Chargers, kind of the run game coordinator, and manage the offensive line. They're keeping defensive coordinator Josh Boyer, which was kind of a questionable move after it seemed like he was kind of more of a Flores guy, and maybe McDaniel wants to go in a different direction, but he's keeping Boyer in his DC, and Danny Crossman staying as special teams coordinator. McDaniel's kind of retained a good part of that defensive staff. Obviously, defensive backs coach Gerald Alexander, they moved off from him. For the most part, they've kind of kept the defensive staff in place. They got a new offensive line coach, it seems, from Boston College. Eric Stutesville is staying as running backs coach, kind of not retaining those co-offensive coordinator titles. But I guess we got to start with the introductory press conference. I mean, what did you make of that? What was your sense of that? Obviously, you wrote a really great story, a profile on Mike McDaniel and his rise to becoming an NFL coach. After listening to him and then doing the work that you did for this story, what are your thoughts on Mike McDaniel?
Well, I'll say, I mean, like, people talk about like when you fire a coach, you go for like the exact opposite coach, and they definitely have done that basically with McDaniel and Flores, because that was not anything like what a Brian Flores press conference would be like. Yeah. I'll also say, like, you get the highlights on Twitter, right? Like when you see Mike McDaniel distilled into a 90-second clip, you're like, oh, this guy's hilarious, funniest guy in the world. And like he's like a charming personality and all that stuff. Yeah. But it's like when you watch a best of SNL and it's like, wow, this show must be hilarious.
Yeah, they don't show like the parts that kind of fall flat.
Yeah, but then it's like, there's one or two good sketches. So, overall entertaining press conference. I don't think we got to kind of like chat with him a little bit on the side after, and he's like pretty, friendly. Like you understand why people like him. And the big thing I got from doing that, and then just talking to people in his past, mostly when he was at Yale and then in the UFL. Which, he's a player at Yale. He had his first position coaching job at 25 or 26, I think, in the UFL. And, he's this 5'9", like he is who he is, right? And for better, for worse, like people are going to look at him and have certain assumptions, and he's not going to necessarily like try to buck those assumptions, right? He's like, it's not like you look at him and then he's like this hard-nosed defensive, like stereotypical football coach. Like, he's just like kind of a goofy looking, goofy talking, a really like bright and personable guy. And I think that like that gets people to buy in. He had a great line about when he had his first, I guess he was assistant wide receivers coach in Houston with Kyle Shanahan. And obviously Andre Johnson was there at the time and was like the best receiver in the league. And he was like, I think Andre Johnson's going to listen to me, but I don't know. And it seems like that's kind of what he's got done all along, is he just is who he is. And for the most part, people have bought into that, right? Like, he's not going to try to force his personality, his will, it sounds like, on people. Maybe, now he's a head coach. Inevitably, people are going to buck up against him and not going to like him. You see it every time there's a new coach. But for the most part, not that you're going to see a lot of people tweeting bad things about a guy when he's getting his first coaching job, but the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive, and you can understand why.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, I really did appreciate how genuine he was. I was curious to see what his demeanor was going to be. We all know he kind of became a cult figure on social media with Dolphins fans because of the Mike Jones kind of reference in the press conferences. And, it's different, when you're a position coach like he was for a good amount of time. I mean, you're talking to the media 2 to 3 times a year, really.
Right.
I mean, it's not like a coordinator. And then when you're a coordinator, you speak once a week. So you get that experience. But this seemed like the first time. And you kind of saw some jitters a little bit, maybe, when he addressed the reports. I mean, this is probably the first time he's spoken to a group of reporters like this, and probably maybe ever. So of course there might be some nerves there. He even said, I didn't major in interviewing, I'm not a public speaker. That's not what I do. I coach football players. But I really did appreciate how he didn't really divert from who he was. I mean, he cracked jokes. He was kind of self-deprecating. I feel like you're not gonna get too much scheme wise and big picture wise from these types of introductory press conferences. But it was good and interesting to hear him kind of talk a little bit about Tua, talk about the offense, even talk about the defense. I know he was asked about Tua specifically, and while yes, he was probably brought in here a lot and primarily because of maybe the work he can do with Tua, he didn't want to pin it on Tua. So he said, hey, Tua, we're going to work with Tua, but he needs blockers. He needs receivers. He needs a defense that's going to hold up. So I really did like that. And then again, really just the personality. I mean, it's crazy. It's they had Flores, who's a stern defensive minded coach, didn't say much, rarely ever smiled with the media. And then you got the complete opposite with Mike McDaniel. So again, we don't know if it's going to work. That's kind of the crapshoot and all this. You just kind of roll the dice. You get some information, you think you make an informed decision, but ultimately you never know how it's going to go. But I think that he's off to a good start. I mean, he gave us ice cream sundaes,
that's true. I forgot about that.
So I mean, I'm not, he's all good.
All good on our end. The Tua answer was interesting because, he is obviously, he's not like a quarterbacks guy, right? He's been a wide receivers coach for the most part, obviously was a run game, did a lot with the running game, running backs coach, run game coordinator in San Francisco. I think the narrative has kind of been, he's being brought in to fix Tua. And maybe I'll get the quarterback coach who can really develop him. But it's a different thing than if they had hired Dable, where that guy's a quarterbacks guy. He's going to try to turn Tua into a better passer, a better, just transform him as a player. And again, obviously, whoever Mike McDaniel hires, whatever staff he kind of builds, they're all going to have their hand in doing that. But the bigger thing is he's going to craft an offense that, it's like what he said, it's not about Tua specifically. It's about what you do to put Tua in the best positions to succeed. He got to an NFC championship game with Jimmy Garoppolo this year. Is that's what he is. He's not a guy who's going to turn Jimmy Garoppolo into Tom Brady, because it's probably not possible to do that. And, I don't know what Tua's ceiling is, but he's a guy who the promise that he brings is that he's going to make the offense, craft an offense to make Tua as successful as possible, not turn Tua into something that he's not right now.
Yeah, and really that starts with the coaching staff, which I really wanted to get on. I mean, for the most part, this coaching staff is together. I mean, I guess we'll start on the offensive side of the ball. That was, Mike McDaniel did announce that he was going to call plays at the introductory press conference. He said, no, he
that was probably the biggest single piece of news to come out of it. I think.
Yeah, after we went an entire season not really knowing who was calling plays. So glad he got that out the way.
I don't remember who asked the question at the press conference, but it was a funny way they phrased it, where it was
Oh yeah,
like,
it may have been Marcel
it
from
was like, are
ESPN.
you
Yeah.
going to call plays? Your offensive coordinator going to call plays? Do you have some creative system to call plays?
And he said, "No, I'm calling plays." So that was
Yeah.
good. He did say he'll also work with the offensive coaching staff as well.
Yeah,
So
obviously. Yeah.
yeah, so that was good to kind of get that out the way. But in regards to kind of putting the best structure around Tua, that starts with the offense. I mean, the coaching staff, and on the offensive side of the ball, his pick for coordinator was obviously going to be a really important one. Ultimately, he hired Frank Smith, previously with the Los Angeles Chargers, as a run game coordinator and offensive line coach. He also has a reputation for not only building offensive linemen, but kind of working with tight ends coach. That was a really interesting pick to me. I was curious to see if maybe he would have grabbed Rich Scangarello, who was the quarterback, or who is the quarterback's coach with the 49ers. They have a relationship dating back. They've been, done some QB workshops with young QB. So I thought that maybe that'd be like a natural pick to get like a offense coordinator who's like kind of specializes in quarterbacks. Obviously, you're going to get a quarterbacks coach as well. We don't know what's going to happen with Charlie Fry. But again, with this hiring of Smith, it really seems like they're really, really leaning heavily into like, we're going to fix the offensive line. We're going to run the ball well. We're going to take pressure off Tua and put him in a position where he doesn't have to do everything. What are your thoughts on that initial hire?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know a whole lot about Frank Smith. Other than like,
I don't either.
A good offensive line coach, like, that the two most important hires he was going to have to make for his staff were, once he decided that he was going to be the play caller, were offensive line coach and quarterbacks coach, because those are obviously the two most, offensive line, the most glaring weakness they had on the field last year. And then quarterbacks coach, if you can turn Tua into a star, it changes the entire calculus of what this franchise looks like going forward. Frank Smith seems like a good fit if you're trying to rebuild an offensive line.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can add much more than that, but the fact that McDaniel's calling plays, this guy is like, he was the run game coordinator in San Diego, or plus the Chargers. So, it seems like they, kind of come from the same sort of philosophies probably. And I don't know, I just think going for an O-line coach here, it was either going to have to be, like you said, a quarterbacks guy or an O-line guy. They went O-line here. We'll see what they do with quarterbacks coach.
Yeah, and kind of big picture with the coaching staff, I just have kind of been just like really interested to follow this whole process and see who he surrounds himself with, because this isn't like a guy who spent like 10 years in one city with one team, one organization. It's like you can kind of like naturally like connect the dots. I mean, he's followed Kyle Shanahan throughout his career,
right?
But they've been with like 5 different teams, a whole bunch of different coaching staffs, a whole bunch of different assistants. So there's a lot.
He's only been an offensive coordinator for 1 year, so it's not like he has this whole group of. It's not like when Brian Dable left for the Giants, it was like, who is he gonna, is he gonna take Ken Dorsey with him? Like, it was just like all these obvious guys. It was like the questions, is that guy gonna come? But it's not like McDaniel was out there hiring a staff underneath him. It was kind of, he was promoted from a staff that already existed. Yeah, but like you said, he's a Shanahan guy. Is probably the one thing.
And he did bring 2 former 49ers assistants. Obviously, Wes Welker, former Miami Dolphin, is coming back.
People excited about that one.
Yeah, exactly. And then John Embry, who was tight ends coach and assistant head coach in San Francisco. I mean, he's coming to Miami with that same exact role. He had a really big instrumental, part in George Kittle's development. George Kittle spoke very glowingly of him when the news came out that he was leaving for Miami. So I think those are going to be really, really good picks. The one position coach hire that I'm sure that all Dolphins fans had their eyes on was that of the offensive line coach, just given how much of a train wreck the unit was last year. And it looks like Matt Applebaum, who was the offensive line coach at Boston College, is going to be the new O-line coach in Miami. I've never heard of the name prior to late last week. It's an interesting hire. Just off of doing some research, it seems like he has a lot of knowledge and proficiency in that zone running scheme that it seems like Mike McDaniel is going to bring here. So from that point, you kind of understand that you want somebody who can really, really teach and implement the system that you want to run. While he doesn't have a lot of like NFL experience. I know he was like a personnel assistant with Washington years back. I mean, I don't think he overlapped. He may have overlapped with McDaniel there. He's really done a lot of his work in college. You know, he was previously with Towson, Davidson. He's a former starter at UConn, but really with Boston College the past 2 years, I mean, he's really churned out some really, really good offensive linemen.
I mean, that is in like, Wisconsin is obviously like offensive line in terms of like just putting all Americans out there, but Boston College punches above their weight in developing offensive linemen in a way that no other college program does, right? Like they're never in the top 25, yet they have an all-American offensive lineman pretty much every year.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, one of them, Zion Johnson, who we
saw. It was like the one guy was like, oh, I like that guy at Senior Bowl, and we were busy with other things. So I don't know. Maybe he'll come to Miami.
Yeah, I mean, the connections are right there, obviously, with this former O-line coach coming to Miami now. I mean, he's a guy who's probably going to go late first round. You think the Dolphins picking at 29, that might be an option. But yeah, I mean, I know some Dolphins fans probably would have liked to get a guy like Mike Munchak, somebody who's like has a proven track record in the NFL. But again, I mean, we're probably going to talk to Mike McDaniel in about 2 weeks at the combine in Indianapolis. And I'd be really interested to see like how he kind of came to some of these decisions. What are the connections that he might have? Was it just kind of like a recommendation and you did some research? But again, if you're looking at getting somebody, really what you want in this offensive line coach, you want somebody who like can really teach, because you have a lot of I mean, there's a lot of talk about the Dolphins needing to throw a bunch of money at a tackle, offensive lineman in free agency. But you got to remember, I mean, like 4 of these guys were picked like in the top like 90 in their drafts in the past 3 years. So we can't just like dump the entire offensive line. I mean, somebody's got to stick there. You think Robert Hunt's going to be
like
there?
But Applebaum is, and I'm basing this on nothing, but other than like the track record he has put together at Boston College, like seems like he's a good developer. Like again, those guys they're getting at Boston College are not 5-star, 4-star.
They're not the blue chip guys that kind of go to Alabama.
Zion Johnson, really undersized guard. Alec Lindstrom, right, was that the lineman they had before?
Yeah, he's probably exactly.
Like it's this whole, on paper, that is what he does well, is develop talent. And he has a lot of clay to mold here when he gets to Miami.
Yeah, and just listening to some of the comments that he's had, not only in an introductory press conference, but later on, I know he's spoken to a lot of different outlets and whatnot. He knows his work is cut out for him on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, when he talks about the defense, he's like, oh, they're good to go. You don't want to tweak too much. But when you talk about the offense, it's kind of like, oh, we got Waddle, we got Tua, who I'm going to work with, and after that's kind of like, yeah. So, he's gonna have his work cut out for him. And I think that is going to be a very, very busy offseason, not only to implement the system that he wants, but to get the right guys in there who can execute the system that he wants. And I'm not even talking about just the players, players, coaching staff, all of that. But again, it looks like he's really honing in on kind of getting guys who can teach that system. Because he's big on that. I mean, he talked about that, like his passion is to teach players. He's going to have unique ways of teaching players. So you want to get guys who are like knowledgeable of that system that you want to run. So you have that.
And they're not that far off from winning. They won 9 games last year. They almost made the playoffs. Like, it's not like he's coming in to totally rebuild. He's coming into, you've got, especially on defense, enough talent to make the playoffs. And if your offense takes even like I don't know where they finish in all the rankings, but if they jump up 5-10 spots in like some of the league rankings,
that would make them an average. That would make them an average offense if they went 5.
Yeah, if they're an average offense next year, which feels like that's kind of like what McDaniel, like it feels like he can get you to baseline average pretty quickly with some of the stuff that his philosophies, that zone read, that Mike Shanahan style offense. That makes you a playoff team. That makes you a threat in like once you get into January and maybe in February.
No, exactly. And kind of moving on to the defense, like we said before, the big decision from Mike McDaniel was to keep Josh Boyer as defensive coordinator. Obviously, he is another holdover from Flores' tenure as head coach. There were a lot of questions really about like what role he had in the defense, in the second half of the season. We know that through the 1-7 start, that was not the defense we were accustomed to seeing. There was a lot of speculation that maybe Flores was calling plays, which he always denied. But you keep him. You get rid of Gerald Alexander, which was kind of a fan favorite. I mean, he had a big role in Javon Holland, Brandon Jones, Xavier Howard had his best season in 2020 under him. What do you think of the decision to keep Boyer, get rid of Alexander, and then kind of retain most of the defensive assistants?
Yeah, I mean, there's clearly got to be like some story with Gerald Alexander, right? The fact that he is the one guy who's out, and again, he's been, I don't want to say like the best developer they've had, but like you said, Javon Holland is like one of the biggest bright spots they had last year. Obviously, your one consistent Pro Bowler is Xavier Howard. Like, he obviously was like had a lot of success. It seems pretty clear. There were a lot of reports out before McDaniel got hired that the Dolphins wanted to hire a coach who would keep that defense intact, and I'm sure it came up in interviews. And again, Mike McDaniel, like you said, has bounced around a lot in his career. A lot of similar coaches, but it's not like he's been in one place forever, been with one staff forever. It makes sense that he doesn't have that kind of pull, right? Like if you had hired Jim Harbaugh, he was going to want to do everything.
They were going to give him the keys to the car completely.
So, you're taking a swing with McDaniel because he's young and seems to have a lot of potential, but you're also like, still gives Grier and Stephen Ross a little bit of sway over decision-making that, how much of that has been reported over the last couple of weeks or last month or so, that like that was part of the problem there, was like everyone was kind of on a different page. And at least so far, they've clearly gotten McDaniel like kind of buying into a grander vision. And again, the defense was really good last year, one of the best defenses in the league, especially in the second half of the year. So makes sense that he would come in and kind of know his strengths, know what is not his strengths, and know that he can kind of trust the defensive personnel that was in place. Now, the question, I guess, as you kind of alluded to, that you would hope that Chris Grier and Stephen Ross have really thought through is how much was Brian Flores the guy responsible for what that defense did? Because it turns out that he was the true mastermind behind all of that, then it's just kind of still an unproven defense.
Yeah, I mean, McDaniel did say, I think in an interview with ESPN, that he spent a lot of time with Boyer before making a decision. He spoke to people who knew him. He really valued the relationship there, the relationships that he had with other players. So ultimately he came to that decision. I think the continuity overall from the entire defense coaching staff will really serve this team well, because again, they don't need to like tweak it. Like they don't need to really change the scheme much. I do think that they need better execution in some spots. They do need to improve maybe inside linebacker, maybe add another pass rusher, especially if Emmanuel Ogbah isn't re-signed. But overall, I mean, by the end of the season, even with that terrible start to the season, they were like a top 12 defense by the end of the year.
Yeah.
So like you said, if you can get the offense to baseline average, you're working with something there, especially in the first season of this new kind of coaching regime. If you get to baseline average with the offense and you can keep, right around the level of consistency with the defense, then you're kind of working with something. But I do think there's going to be some pressure on Boyer, because again,
definitely,
I mean, we got to be honest, this was Brian Flores' defense. Josh Boyer may have been defensive coordinator. He may have been calling plays up to a point we still don't even know. But you would think that the people inside the room know. And, obviously they have confidence in retaining him. If they really didn't think that he'd be, suited to be defensive coordinator, especially with Flores gone, they would have, maybe not have given the suggestion to Mike McDaniel. So the continuity will serve the team well, but if anybody's on, it's a new coaching staff, new coach, so not really a ton of pressure to like provide instant results. I think that there will be some expectations, but really with Boyer, I mean, you're kind of looking at him a little extra hard to say, hey, are you able to kind of get the job done without the person who we all kind of assumed was leading the charge with the defense?
Yeah, I mean, the two guys kind of feel invincible, but there's a lot of pressure on Grier and Ross too, because like you're taking a gamble that Brian Flores was only so valuable to what this defense does, or this defense did. So we'll see if they how their self-evaluation abilities are.
For sure. And really, as we transition into the offseason, I think we had the Senior Bowl a couple of weeks ago. Super Bowl just ended. The next kind of checkpoint is the combine in 2 weeks. Obviously, we saw a lot of the most highly touted upperclassmen, but now you get to see some guys who obviously didn't kind of qualify for the Senior Bowl. I mean, and then not too long after that, you have free agency. So really, the ball really gets going really quickly soon. Do you have any big picture predictions for, what we see? I know that the Dolphins have the most cap room in the NFL. They're going to have some draft capital. They got the coach in place now, and we know the quarterback is probably going to be here next year. You got any predictions on something that we'll see?
I mean, it's not a bold prediction, but they got to spend some money on the offensive line, I think. Again, like the offensive line coach, I'm sure they'll tell him, hey, develop some of these guys. Like, can Austin Jackson be a good left guard someday? That's possible. He was a first-round pick. He had his moments. Can Michael Dieter be your center of the future? It's maybe. But I mean, there's a gaping hole really at both tackle spots, but especially right tackle. And that, they're going to spend some money there. Otherwise, will this finally be the year they draft a running back? I kind of feel like it has to be the year they finally draft a running back kind of high. Given what Mike McDaniel wants to do, it seems like what he wants to do. They can't run the zone read stuff that he wants to run with Myles Gaskin, right? Like, that's just not going to work.
I mean, hey, if you look back at some of those 49ers teams, they were getting it done with late round picks and drafted free agents.
That's true.
Mostert, I think the highest draft pick they had was Elijah Mitchell. But outside of that, I mean, they were getting the job done with some, unheralded players. So I don't know. I wrote about it a couple of weeks ago. Is this the year that they spend a high draft pick on a running back? I don't think so. I think I guess kind of going into my prediction, this isn't really a prediction, but I think we're going to see a splurge on offense in the draft.
Yeah. I think all the money has to go to offense, basically, right?
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, again, when I just kind of listen to Mike McDaniel speak about the offense, it's like we got Waddle, and I think Waddle is going to be a big part of this offense. But after that, it's like you need more playmaker. You can't just rely on Waddle and have Tua kind of running for his life. I guess what I was gonna really mention my big prediction, and I don't know again if this is even a big prediction, but something just tells me that between Mike Gesicki and Emmanuel Ogbah, one of those guys isn't going to be here. I mean, I know that there was already some kind of speculation just because of the cap. I mean, they had a lot of cap room, but again, only one of those guys can get franchised, and you wonder if that's going to be Ogbah or Gesicki. I don't know. I just feel like when you kind of factor in the amount of money that they're probably going to have to put in to fix the offensive line, if they tag one of those guys, I mean, if you tag Emmanuel Ogbah, you're talking $17-18 million. If it's Gesicki, it's a little lower. It's probably more around 11 mil. But something just tells me one of those guys isn't going to be back in a Miami Dolphins uniform, which would be unfortunate because I think Emmanuel Ogbah has been great for this team, deserves this money, and Gesicki likewise. There's some questions over the fit in this offense. Can he be a reliable blocker? Will McDaniel even see him that way? Something just tells me that, again, they've got a lot of money. I mean, I think they've got 70 mil. But I mean, if you throw 20 mil at a offensive lineman or two, that drops the amount of money you have. And then if you franchise a guy, then you got to start looking and see how much money you have left. I mean, they still have some smaller name unrestricted free agents that they got to take care of. They got some restricted free agents that they have to, devote some money to. So again, I think that while they have a lot of resources, there's going to be some hard decisions this offseason.
Yeah, one of those guys, and they got the tag deals on one of them. Maybe it really sting to lose Mike Gesicki for nothing. I think in particular, Ogbah's been great, but there's a million pass rushers. Gesicki is a guy who, he's not that he's like a top 5 tight end or anything, but he's close there.
He's right there. Like he's not in the Kittle.
There are certain teams, and the Dolphins, if Brian Flores was here, would probably qualify that he would be a no-brainer to you want him on the roster. So I think it would really hurt to lose him for nothing. But I think Ogbah is, when he got rolling, he was great 2 years ago and really got rolling in the second half of last year. And that defense, he's been a really reliable kind of number one edge rusher for them. Both those guys have been a really big part of what they can do. To me, Gesicki feels less replaceable, but he also just might not be a fit, I think, is probably the way to look at the situation with those two guys.
Yeah, but that's an interesting point real quick, because when asking like what scheme are you going to bring,
right?
We know the foundations of the scheme McDaniel is going to bring, but he said the offense is going to be tailored to the skill set of the players. Yeah. So again, it depends on kind of how he views it in that evaluation period. Like, does he say, hey, this guy just cannot work in my scheme? Or does he say, hey, he might have some limitations in his game, but what he does really well, we can maximize that. I tend to think that McDaniel kind of looks.
Yeah, I'm sure like if they had Mike Gesicki, he would be one of the most productive tight ends in the league and all that kind of stuff as a receiver. I just worry that if you want to be this run heavy team, which is kind of what we see, it seems like they would like to get to, given Tua's limitations and given just, McDaniel's background. Mike Gesicki is not typically on the field a lot when teams run the ball, which is
or pass block, or he doesn't get asked to pass block. So
it just makes it tricky. Like, can your most let's say he's your third best offensive player or something like that, can he only be on the field for X number of plays? Like that's the one challenge I think there. But again, this is all speculation. For all we know, this team's gonna, they're not running a lot last year, so we're asking a lot for this team to go from one of the least successful running teams in the league to one of the most run heavy teams in the league. Like, I know that's what, like I said, McDaniel comes from that Shanahan system, but it's a steep hill to climb to get there.
Yeah, it's steep hill to climb, but McDaniel's working hard, hitting the ground running, to kind of bring to fruition the team that everyone in Dolphins Nation is hoping for. I mean, we're definitely gonna see the path he takes over the next couple months. That brings us to the end of another edition of the Dolphins In Depth podcast. I want to thank David Wilson so much for joining me. Really enjoyed these past couple of weeks. We've been working a lot together, whether it's
we have
Flores lawsuit, Senior Bowl, McDaniel stuff. Definitely going to be fun over the next weeks and months to see how he kind of shapes this team, and we'll be there every step of the way to recap it. So we'll be back next week to talk Dolphins football. But until then, you guys take care. Bye.